At 39 years old, Marcus Hayes earned $72,000 a year as a commercial appraiser. It was a good, solid living built on a decade of meticulous work, a sharp eye for zoning codes, and a reputation for unshakable honesty. He lived in a historic, multi-million-dollar waterfront home on Charleston's iconic Battery, a sentence that always felt like it belonged to someone else's life. The truth was, it did. It belonged to his wife, Simone. On a sun-drenched Friday afternoon in October, at precisely 5:15 p.m., Marcus walked into that home to find his life being dismantled with champagne. Simone was standing in the magnificent sunroom, a space enclosed by floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the harbor. The setting sun cast long, golden fingers across the polished Italian marble floor, a floor he had helped level and grout himself. She was wearing a silk dress the color of cream, a simple garment that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment on the small rental property he still owned in North Charleston from before their marriage. Beside her stood her brother, Julian, holding a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, its distinctive yellow label a flag of celebration. Her parents, stiff and smiling with the practiced ease of old money, completed the tableau. They were a portrait of aristocratic triumph, and Marcus had just walked into the frame as the subject of their victory. "Marcus, darling," Simone said, her voice smooth and cool, entirely devoid of the warmth he once cherished. "We were just waiting for you." Julian, without a word of greeting, popped the cork. It flew across the room with a loud, celebratory thwump, landing near Marcus's worn leather work boots. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of the grand room. He looked at the four of them, their faces glowing with a strange, predatory glee. They looked like a pride of lions who had just cornered their prey. What's all this?" Marcus asked, his voice sounding hollow to his own ears. He felt a cold dread coiling in his stomach. Simone didn't answer. Instead, she glided over to a sleek, $12,000 Roche-Beaubois glass console table and picked up a thick manila envelope. She held it out to him. Her nails were perfectly manicured, a deep crimson that seemed to pulse against the pale paper. "These are for you," she said. He took the envelope. It felt heavy, final. His hands, usually so steady when measuring plot lines or calculating square footage, trembled slightly. He opened the clasp and slid out the contents. The bold heading on the first page hit him like a physical blow: Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. His eyes scanned the words, but they swam together, a meaningless jumble of legal jargon. He could feel their four pairs of eyes on him, watching, waiting for him to crumble. He could feel the humiliation crawl up his neck like a hot rash. He had spent 7 years dedicated to this woman, to this family, to this house. He had poured his time, his energy, and his very soul into being the husband he thought she wanted. And this was his severance package. Julian stepped forward, pouring 4 flutes of the bubbling pale gold liquid. He handed one to Simone, one to each of his parents, but deliberately skipped Marcus. He raised his glass. "To new beginnings," Julian said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. He looked directly at Marcus. "Sign it fast, Marcus. We're celebrating tonight, and we'd rather not have you lingering." The cruelty of the line was so pure, so refined. It was almost impressive. It was designed to shatter him, to remind him of his status as a temporary guest in their world. Marcus looked from Julian's sneering face to Simone's coolly indifferent one. He looked at the divorce petition in his hands, his gaze finally focusing. He flipped past the initial pages, his appraiser's mind instinctively searching for the asset schedule, the part of any contract where the real story is told. And then he saw it. Under the section detailing the division of property, there was a single, critical line item: primary marital residence. 24 South Battery, Charleston, SC. Separate property of the petitioner, Simone, valued at $480,000. $480,000. The number seemed to vibrate on the page, a wave of something that was not shock, not grief, and not even anger washed over him. It was a feeling of profound, icy clarity. It was the feeling a chess player gets when his opponent, in a moment of arrogant overconfidence, makes a fatal, game-ending blunder. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of pure, surgical certainty. He looked up, meeting Simone's confused gaze. She had expected tears, pleading, maybe even anger. She had not expected this quiet, unnerving smile. "Of course," Marcus said, his voice suddenly calm and steady. "I'll sign it." He folded the papers neatly and tucked them back into the envelope. "You all enjoy your celebration." He turned and walked out of the sunroom, leaving them in a stunned, champagne-scented silence. They had no idea what they had just done. They had handed him the keys to their own destruction, and they were toasting to it. Have you ever been in a situation where you were completely underestimated? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of justice and empowerment. The facade of their marriage had been built on a foundation of similar, smaller underestimations. Looking back, Marcus could see the cracks had been there from the beginning. They met at a gallery opening in Charleston's French Quarter. Simone, luminous in a $2,400 Burberry dress, was holding court, a planet of old money and influence. And he was just a satellite, pulled into her orbit by chance. He was there because his firm had appraised the building and he'd been given a courtesy ticket. He wore his best suit, a respectable but unremarkable $400 offering from a department store, and his trusty $89 Timex watch. Simone was charmed by what she called his authenticity. He was a black man who worked with his hands and his mind, who could talk about load-bearing walls and property law with the same easy confidence. He wasn't from her world of trust funds and regattas, and for a while, that novelty was enough. Their courtship was a whirlwind of contrasts. She'd take him to dinners where the wine list started at $150 a bottle, and he'd take her for fried shrimp at a shack on Shem Creek where the meal for two cost $30. She thought it was quaint. When they married, her father, a man whose portfolio was rumored to be worth north of $50 million, gifted them the house at 24 South Battery. It was a staggering gift, a 3-story antebellum mansion with double-tiered piazzas and a private dock. The deed was put in Simone's name, a detail her father's lawyer, a man with a smile as thin as a razor blade, made sure Marcus understood. "Just a formality, to protect the family legacy," he'd said during a meeting in his oak-paneled office that smelled of leather and generational wealth. At the time, Marcus, blinded by love, had nodded. He was marrying Simone, not her family's assets. The house, while magnificent, needed work. Decades of salt air and humidity had taken their toll. Simone saw it as a canvas. Marcus saw it as a project. For the first few years, he poured his weekends and evenings into it. He refinished the heart pine floors by hand, a grueling task that saved them an estimated $30,000 in labor. He modernized the wiring, crawling through dusty, stifling attic spaces, a job that would have cost at least $25,000. He rebuilt the crumbling brick garden walls, sourcing reclaimed Charleston gray bricks to match the originals, a project quoted by contractors at $40,000. Simone would watch him, a G&T in her hand, from the comfort of a wicker chair. "You're so handy, darling," she'd say, as if he were a particularly clever pet. He wasn't just contributing sweat. He was contributing capital, albeit indirectly. His $72,000 salary went into their joint account, an account from which Simone made all the major withdrawals. It was her trust fund, a steady flow of about $20,000 a month, that paid for the big-ticket items. The $80,000 custom kitchen with its wolf range and sub-zero refrigerator, her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 indulgence, and her quarterly shopping trips to New York that never cost less than $15,000. His income was a drop in the bucket, used for groceries, utilities, and what Simone condescendingly called household incidentals. It was a constant, subtle reminder of the financial chasm between them. He drove a 2014 Ford F-150 with 187,000 miles on it, a practical vehicle for his job, while her garage housed a collection of German engineering. The biggest project, the one that should have changed everything, was the rezoning. About 3 years into their marriage, Simone had an idea. Wouldn't it be lovely, she mused one evening, to have a little art gallery or a chic little boutique on the ground floor? So many of these old homes are being converted. Marcus, the professional appraiser, knew exactly what that meant. Changing a property's zoning from purely residential to mixed-use commercial was a complex, arduous process, but it could exponentially increase its value. "That's a big undertaking, Simone," he had told her. "It involves petitions, public hearings, city planning reviews. It can take over a year." "Well, you know about all that stuff, don't you?" she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Just make it happen." And so he did. It became his personal mission. He spent over a year on it. He drafted the 150-page application himself, a document that would have cost $20,000 to outsource to a legal firm. He conducted the market analysis, compiled the traffic studies, and drew up the preliminary site plans. He paid the $2,500 in application fees from their joint account. Most importantly, he submitted the entire package under his own name and commercial appraiser's license, number SC5822. His professional reputation was the guarantor of the application's legitimacy. He attended no fewer than 5 evening meetings with the Charleston City Planning Commission, sitting on hard wooden benches for hours, waiting his turn to speak. He presented his case with the calm, data-driven precision that defined his career. Simone never attended a single meeting. "Oh, darling, those things are so dreadfully boring," she'd said. "Just tell me when it's done." When the final approval came through, 18 months before the divorce papers, he was ecstatic. He came home with a copy of the official city ordinance, his heart pounding with a sense of accomplishment. He had single-handedly transformed a significant family asset. "We did it, Simone," he'd announced, holding up the document. "The house is officially zoned for commercial use on the ground floor. Do you know what this does to the property value?" She was scrolling through her phone, looking at a net-a-porter sale. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, not even looking up. "Does this mean I can call the designer about the boutique now?" He stood there in the middle of their custom-built $80,000 kitchen, holding a piece of paper that represented hundreds of hours of his professional labor and a near $1 million increase in her net worth. And she had dismissed it with the same casual indifference she'd show a gardener who'd trimmed the hedges. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of foolishness. He had been working to build their future, but she had only ever seen him as a useful tool for building her own. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was hollow. The cruelty hadn't begun with the champagne and the divorce papers. It had been a slow, escalating campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts. The outrage had been accumulating for years, a debt of disrespect that was long overdue for collection. One of the earliest and most persistent humiliations was the allowance. About a year into the marriage, Simone had sat him down in the formal living room, a room so perfect it felt like a museum exhibit. She had a spreadsheet open on her $3,000 MacBook Pro. "Marcus, we need to talk about spending," she'd said, her tone that of a patient but firm CEO addressing a profligate junior employee. "Your salary goes into the joint account, which is lovely, but my trust income is what really funds our lifestyle. I think it would be more organized. if we allocated you a weekly budget for your personal expenses?" He was stunned. "A budget? Simone, I'm your husband, not your child. I use my money for gas for my truck, for my lunches when I'm out on appraisals." "Exactly," she'd interrupted smoothly, "and those are the things we need to track. Let's say $500 a week? That should be more than sufficient for your little odds and ends." From that day on, he was on an allowance in his own home. Every month, she would review the credit card statements. "A charge for $18 at Caviar and Bananas?" she'd ask, her brow furrowed in disapproval. "Darling, we have a personal chef who prepares your lunches. You just have to remember to take them. This is wasteful." It didn't matter that he'd been on a site visit an hour away and couldn't get home. He was made to feel like a profligate child, stealing from the cookie jar. He'd buy a new set of socket wrenches for a repair on the piazza railings, a $150 expense that saved them a $1,000 handyman bill, and she'd circle it. "More tools, Marcus? Your workshop is starting to look like a Home Depot." The constant scrutiny was designed to infantilize him, to reinforce the power dynamic. Her money, her rules. Then there was her brother Julian. He was 2 years younger than Simone, an investment banker who had never truly worked a day in his life, merely managed the money that money made. He treated Marcus with a contempt so blatant, it was almost a caricature. Whenever he visited, the air in the grand house would grow thick with his condescension. During one particularly memorable Sunday brunch, Julian leaned back in his chair, swirling a mimosa. "So, Marcus," he began, his voice loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, "still counting other people's bricks for a living?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "It's called commercial appraisal, Julian. It's a bit more complex than that." "Is it?" Julian said with a theatrical yawn. "Sounds dreadfully tedious. Simone, darling, I do hope you're not bored out of your mind. When are you going to find a partner who can keep up with you? Someone on your level?" He said it with a wink as if it were a joke, but the barb was sharp and aimed directly at Marcus's pride. Marcus looked to Simone, hoping for her to defend him, to put her arrogant brother in his place. She just laughed, a light tinkling sound. "Oh, leave him alone, Julian. Marcus is very earnest about his little job. It keeps him busy." Earnest. Little job. The words hung in the air, stripping him of his dignity. He sat there, his expensive chef-prepared eggs Benedict turning to ash in his mouth, and said nothing. To object would be to cause a scene, to be the ungrateful, ill-tempered outsider. So he swallowed the insult along with his food. That day, he felt the first real flicker of cold anger, a feeling he carefully buried. The ultimate confirmation of his status came during a dinner with Simone's parents at their sprawling estate on Kiowa Island. Her father, Richard, a man who moved with the slow, deliberate certainty of someone who had never been told no, was holding forth on the importance of legacy. "This house on the Battery," Richard said, gesturing with his wine glass, "it's more than a building, it's a statement. It's been in our extended family for nearly a century. It's a symbol of our place in this city." He looked at Simone, then his gaze slid over to Marcus, though he didn't address him directly. The prenuptial agreement, of course, ensures that the core asset remains protected. It's a family legacy, and it will always be a part of this family. Marcus knew the terms of the prenup. He had signed it, feeling at the time that it was a fair protection of the assets Simone brought into the marriage. It stipulated that the initial value of the home, which was appraised at $480,000 at the time of their wedding, was her separate property. But he also knew a crucial detail of family law that Richard, in his arrogance, seemed to overlook. Any increase in the value of a separate asset due to the active efforts of either spouse during the marriage becomes a marital asset. His work on the rezoning wasn't just being handy. It was a direct, professional contribution that had fundamentally changed the asset's nature and value. He said nothing, simply nodding as he took a sip of his water. He let them believe he was as ignorant as they assumed him to be. In the final 6 months leading up to the ambush, Simone's cruelty shifted from overt condescension to a cold, calculated withdrawal. The warmth vanished from her touch, then from her voice, then from her presence altogether. She was always out with friends or at a charity meeting. She started taking phone calls on the piazza, her voice a low murmur he couldn't quite hear. She stopped wearing her wedding ring, claiming it was being cleaned, a cleaning that seemed to last for weeks. The house, once a shared space, began to feel like hers alone. He was a ghost, haunting its halls. He'd come home from a long day on the road to find the remnants of a lunch party he wasn't invited to. He'd try to start a conversation, and she would answer with one-word replies, her eyes glued to her phone. One night, desperate to break through the wall of ice she had built, he asked her what was wrong. "Simone, we're drifting apart. Talk to me." She looked at him, and for a moment he saw a flicker of the woman he had married, but it was quickly extinguished, replaced by a cool assessment. "I just feel like I'm being held back, Marcus," she said, her voice flat. "I have this one life to live, and I need to live it for me. I'm not sure you fit into that picture anymore." It was a devastatingly honest, devastatingly cruel statement. He wasn't a partner. He was an accessory she was considering getting rid of, like a last-season handbag. The outrage he had suppressed for years began to simmer, no longer a flicker, but a steady, burning flame. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just nodded, the quiet acceptance that she and her family had mistaken for weakness. They had taught him, through 1,000 painful lessons, that in their world, you didn't show your hand until you were ready to win the whole pot. The discovery was not a single moment, but a series of clicks, like a lock tumbling open. It happened on that Friday, October 12th at 5:15 p.m. in the sunroom of the house at 24 South Battery. The first click was the pop of the champagne cork, a sound that severed the last thread of hope he had for his marriage. The sensory details of that moment were seared into his memory. The cloying scent of Simone's 400-a-bottle Frederick Malle perfume mingling with the yeasty aroma of the champagne. The oppressive silence after Julian's cruel toast. The cold, unyielding surface of the $12,000 glass table beneath his fingertips as he stood there, holding the envelope. The weight of the documents felt disproportionate to their size, each page a leaden plate of betrayal. Outside, the setting sun ignited the harbor, the light glinting off the water and the polished chrome of a passing yacht, a world of beauty and wealth he was being forcibly ejected from. The second click was Julian's line. "Sign it fast, Marcus. We're celebrating tonight." It wasn't just a request. It was a command wrapped in an insult. It communicated with brutal efficiency that his presence was a stain on their perfect evening. It was meant to hurry him, to make him sign without thinking, to accept his fate as a discarded object. But it had the opposite effect. It triggered not panic, but a switch in his brain. The emotional, grieving husband receded, and the methodical, detail-oriented commercial appraiser took over. When he finally focused on the papers, he wasn't reading them as a man whose heart was breaking. He was analyzing a contract, searching for flaws, for leverage, for the fine print where mistakes are made. His eyes, trained to scan hundreds of pages of legal descriptions and financial statements, flew past the boilerplate language about irretrievable breakdown and residency requirements. He was hunting for one thing: Schedule A, the list of assets and debts. He found it on page 7. His finger traced down the list. Simone's BMW 3 Series, listed as separate property. Her investment portfolio, separate property. Her jewelry collection, separate property. Then he saw the line that made his heart stop, not from pain, but from a sudden surge of adrenaline. Item 3, primary marital residence, address 24 South Battery, Charleston, SC 29401. Title holder, Simone DeWitt Hayes. Legal status, separate property of the petitioner by virtue of inheritance. And then the final fatal line, estimated fair market value, $480,000. The third and final click. It was the sound of the entire game board flipping over. $480,000. He stared at the number and the world came into sharp, crystalline focus. That wasn't just a lowball estimate. It was the exact residential tax appraisal value of the home from before their marriage. From before he had spent 18 months of his life navigating the bureaucratic maze of the city of Charleston, using his professional license and expertise to have the property rezoned for mixed-use commercial purposes. They were using a 3-year-old fraudulent valuation. 1,000 thoughts cascaded through his mind at once. Did they not know? Had Simone so completely dismissed his little project that she had no idea of the immense value he had created? Or was it more sinister? Did they know, and were they banking on the assumption that he was too heartbroken, too stupid, or too intimidated to notice? That the simple appraiser from North Charleston would just take the pittance they offered, sign his name, and shuffle away in defeat? It had to be the latter. The precision of the number, matching the old appraisal perfectly, was too specific to be an accident. This was a calculated move, masterminded by her father's lawyers and executed by his smug, champagne-swilling family. They had conspired to defraud him. And in that moment, the years of accumulated humiliation, the condescending remarks from Julian, the financial control, the casual dismissal of his work, it all coalesced not into rage, but into a cold, hard resolve. They had underestimated him at every turn. They saw him as a simple man, an accessory, a temporary fixture. They had never once seen him as an equal, a professional, or a threat. That was why he smiled. It was the purest, most genuine smile he had given in months. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed a royal flush. He looked at Simone, at her pretty, expectant face, waiting for his collapse, and he felt a strange sense of pity for her. She was celebrating the beginning of the end. But it wasn't his end she was toasting to. It was her own. She had just made a mistake worth $870,000, and she had no idea. The strategy was simple. Play the part they had cast for him. The broken, defeated husband was a role he would inhabit with Oscar-worthy dedication. Every lie, every feigned moment of weakness was a scene designed to lull them into a state of absolute security. His performance began the very next morning, Saturday, 8 a.m. He started packing. He moved with a leaden slowness, as if each object he touched was a painful memory. He folded his worn Carhartt jackets and his plain, inexpensive t-shirts, placing them into cardboard boxes he'd gotten from the grocery store. Simone watched him from the doorway of their cavernous, walk-in closet, a space larger than the living room of his first apartment. Her side was a boutique of designer labels and color-coded shoes. His was a small, functional corner. "Can you try to hurry this up?" she said, tapping her foot impatiently. She was already dressed for brunch, wearing a white linen jumpsuit that cost more than the entire contents of the box he was packing. "I have friends coming over at noon for mimosas. I'd rather you were gone by then." Marcus looked up at her, his face a mask of weary sadness. "Simone, this is my life. I'm packing into boxes. Can you give me a minute?" "It's just stuff, Marcus," she said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "You can get new stuff." He nodded slowly, letting his shoulders slump in defeat. "You're right. It's just stuff." He continued packing, making sure to let out a heavy, audible sigh every few minutes. He packed his handful of books on architectural history, his old college mug, and the framed photo of his late mother, a warm, smiling black woman whose love was the only inheritance he'd ever needed. As he took it off the nightstand, he let his hand tremble just enough for Simone to see. She turned and walked away, satisfied that he was appropriately crushed. By Monday, he was moved into a Spartan two-bedroom apartment in North Charleston. The rent was $250 a month. The walls were thin, the appliances were dated, and the view was of the parking lot. It was a world away from the manicured gardens and harbor views of 24 South Battery. He made sure to text Simone a picture of his new, bleak living room, a single lamp illuminating a second-hand couch. "Getting settled in," he wrote. He received no reply. The phone call came on Wednesday evening. He was sitting at his cheap dining table, a stack of documents spread out before him, the rezoning application, the city ordinances, the market comps he was already compiling. When his phone rang with her name, he took a deep breath, cleared his throat, and answered on the third ring. "Hello?" he said, his voice deliberately shaky. "Marcus? It's Simone." Her voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with a false concern that made his skin crawl. "I was just calling to see how you are, to make sure you're coping." "I'm managing," he lied, letting a crack of emotion enter his voice. "It's hard. This place is quiet. I miss the house. I miss you." He let the last part hang in the air, a pathetic little hook. He knew she was recording this call, or at least making mental notes for her lawyer. He was doing the same. South Carolina was a one-party consent state, a fact he had verified that morning. The recording app on his phone was silently running. "I know it's hard, darling," she cooed, "but it's for the best. We both know that." There was a pause. "Have you had a chance to look at the papers I gave you? My lawyer said it's all very standard." "I glanced at them," he said, sounding lost. "I don't know, Simone. Lawyers and all that. It's a lot. Should I just sign them to get it over with?" Her relief was almost audible. "Yes, Marcus. That's the best thing to do. Let's not drag this out and make it ugly. It's a clean break. Just sign them, and we can both move on." "Okay, Simone," he whispered. "Okay, I'll do it this week." The final act of his performance was a calculated chance encounter. He knew Julian frequented a small, upscale coffee shop on Broad Street, a block from his firm. On Friday morning, Marcus went there, ordering a simple black coffee. He wore a wrinkled shirt and hadn't shaved in 2 days. He sat at a small table, staring blankly out the window, the picture of a man adrift. Right on schedule, at 9:15 a.m., Julian walked in, looking sharp in an $8,700 Armani suit, barking an order for a macchiato into his phone. He spotted Marcus, and a slow, cruel smirk spread across his face. He ended his call and sauntered over. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in," Julian said, looking Marcus up and down with disdain. "Tough break, old man. Life in the real world treating you okay?" Marcus looked up, feigning surprise. "Oh, Julian. Hey." "Heard you moved to the cheap seats up in North Charleston," Julian continued, his voice low and mocking. "Quite the downgrade from the Battery. But look on the bright side. You got to live like a king for a few years on my sister's dime. Most guys like you never get that chance." Marcus just nodded, his eyes downcast. "Yeah, I guess." He paused, then looked up, his expression one of pure exhaustion. "Listen, I'm signing the papers today. I'm done fighting. I just want to put this behind me." Julian's smirk widened into a triumphant grin. He reached out and patted Marcus firmly on the shoulder, a gesture not of comfort, but of ownership, of dismissal. "Good man," he said, his voice filled with condescending finality. "Know your place." Julian walked away to collect his coffee, confident that the problem had been handled. The simple, the Senko's broken husband knew his place. He had no idea that Marcus's place was at a table across town, in a high-rise office building, with a lawyer who was about to turn their world upside down. While Marcus played the part of the grieving husband, he spent every other waking moment becoming a meticulous legal strategist. The small apartment in North Charleston was no longer a symbol of his downfall. It was his war room. The dining table was covered not with sorrowful takeout containers, but with a mountain of organized, weaponized paper. His first and most important step was hiring the right attorney. He didn't want a bulldog, he wanted a surgeon. He spent 2 days researching, reading reviews, and checking case histories. He settled on Ava Williams, a partner at a boutique firm known for handling complex financial divorces for high-net-worth individuals. She was a sharp, elegant black woman in her late 40s, with a reputation for being 10 steps ahead of her opponents. Her fee was a steep $650 per hour, a sum that would have made him balk a month ago. Now, it felt like an investment. He walked into her office on the top floor of a modern building on Calhoun Street. The view of Marion Square was impressive, but Marcus was focused on the task at hand. He carried a single, thick leather briefcase. Ava Williams greeted him with a firm handshake. "Mr. Hayes, please have a seat. Tell me what's going on." Marcus didn't waste time on the emotional details of the breakup. He opened his briefcase and began laying out documents on her vast mahogany desk, creating a neat, undeniable timeline of facts. "Miss Williams, my wife of 7 years has filed for divorce," he began, his voice level and professional. "They are attempting to claim the marital home, located at 24 South Battery, as her sole and separate property, based on an outdated and fraudulent valuation." He placed the first document on the desk. This is a copy of the divorce petition. As you can see on page 7, they have valued the property at $480,000. Next, he laid down a certified appraisal from 3 years prior. This is the residential appraisal they are basing that number on. It's from before a significant material change was made to the property. Then came the heart of his case. He produced a thick, spiral-bound folder. This is the complete file for the successful rezoning of the property from R1 residential to mixed-use commercial residential. The application was filed 18 months ago. He tapped the cover page. "As you can see, I am the applicant of record. The entire petition was filed under my state commercial appraiser's license, number SC5822. He slid a copy of his license next to the file. He continued, his voice gaining strength with each piece of evidence. "This is the official ordinance from the City of Charleston Planning Commission, dated April of last year, confirming the zoning change. And these," he added, producing bank statements, "show the application and legal notice fees totaling over $3,000, being paid from our joint marital account." Finally, he placed his masterwork on the table. It was a brand new 100-page commercial appraisal report bound in a professional blue cover. "And this, Ms. Williams, is my certified commercial appraisal of the property as of this week. I've used 3 comparable sales of mixed-use properties on the peninsula from the last 6 months. The fair market value of 24 South Battery is not $480,000. It is $1,300,000. Ava Williams had been listening with intense focus, her chin resting on her hand. She picked up his appraisal, her sharp eyes scanning the executive summary, the methodology, the comps. She looked at the rezoning file. She looked back at the divorce petition with its laughably low number. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator who has just caught the scent of blood in the water. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice a low purr of professional excitement. "This isn't just a divorce case. This is a gift. She leaned back in her high-backed leather chair, which cost at least $5,000. They've committed potential fraud on the court. They have so profoundly underestimated you that it borders on malpractice on their lawyer's part. So what's our strategy? Marcus asked. Our strategy is silence, Ava said, her eyes gleaming. We do nothing. We let them think you've accepted it. We let them think you're signing their standard agreement. We will file our response on the final day before the deadline. We won't just object. We will file a motion for an emergency hearing on the valuation of the primary asset and for sanctions against the petitioner for submitting a fraudulent financial declaration. She leaned forward. They want a quiet, cheap, quick divorce. We are going to make it loud, expensive, and excruciatingly slow. They think they're playing checkers, Mr. Hayes. We're about to show them how to play chess. Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest, replaced by a feeling of grim, satisfying control. He was no longer a victim. He was a client. He was a plaintiff. He had taken their cruelty and disrespect and forged it into a weapon, and now he had hired a master to wield it. The increase in value, Ava continued, doing quick math on a legal pad, $1.3 million minus the original $480,000. That's an $820,000 increase. That increase, created by your direct professional labor during the marriage, is 100% a marital asset. In South Carolina, that means you are entitled to an equitable distribution. We will be arguing for a 50% share. That's $410,000, Mr. Hayes. They tried to cheat you, and in doing so, they opened the door for you to claim what is rightfully yours. He nodded. That's exactly what I was thinking. Good, Ava said, closing the file. Now go home. Act sad. Be pathetic. Let them get comfortable. The more confident they are, the harder they will fall. Marcus stood up and shook her hand. Thank you, Ms. Williams. No, she said, her smile widening. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. This is going to be fun. The Charleston County Family Court building was a modern, sterile structure of concrete and glass, a place where emotions were flattened by bureaucracy and lives were dissected under the unflattering glare of fluorescent lights. On the day of the hearing, Tuesday, December 4th, the air was thick with the quiet desperation of a dozen other fractured families. Marcus sat beside Ava Williams at their designated table. He wore the same $400 suit he had worn to the gallery where he'd met Simone, but today it felt different. It felt like armor. He was calm, his hands resting flat on the polished wood table. His heart beat with a slow, steady rhythm. Across the room, Simone and her team were a portrait of relaxed arrogance. She was dressed in an $8,700 Armani power suit of severe black, her hair pulled back in a sleek, elegant chignon. Julian was beside her, not as a party to the case, but as moral or immoral support. He kept leaning over to whisper in her ear, both of them sharing small, superior smiles. Her lawyer, a portly man named Franklin Bennett with a florid face and a family name that had been prominent in Charleston for a century, looked utterly bored. He shuffled his papers with the air of a man who had a golf game to get to. They expected this to be a 5-minute affair, a simple procedural hearing to rubber stamp their agreement. All rise, the bailiff intoned. Judge Eleanor Vance, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for having zero tolerance for games, swept into the room and took her seat. Calling the case of Hayes versus Hayes, petition for dissolution, the clerk announced. Judge Vance looked over her glasses. Mr. Bennett, you may begin. Franklin Bennett rose to his feet with a slight grunt. Thank you, Your Honor. This is, thankfully, a straightforward and amicable dissolution. My client, Ms. Hayes, and the respondent, Mr. Hayes, have reached an agreement. He gestured vaguely toward Marcus. The petition and the proposed settlement agreement have been filed with the court. We are simply here to have it entered into the record. My client has been exceptionally generous, Your Honor, asking for no alimony or further support from Mr. Hayes, despite the significant disparity in their financial positions. He continued, his voice droning on. The primary asset, the family home at 24 South Battery, is the separate property of my client, an inheritance, and its value is listed in the financial declaration at $480,000. Mr. Hayes has agreed to these terms. He sat down, looking pleased with himself. He had presented his case in under 60 seconds. He glanced at his watch. Judge Vance looked toward their table. Ms. Williams, any response? Ava Williams stood up, her movements fluid and precise. She was the picture of calm authority. Yes, Your Honor, a significant one. A flicker of annoyance crossed Bennett's face. Julian leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Your Honor, Ava began, her voice clear and carrying through the quiet courtroom. We are in agreement that the marriage is irretrievably broken. However, we have a profound and fundamental disagreement with the financial declaration submitted by the petitioner, specifically with the valuation of the primary asset. Bennett started to rise, sputtering. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We had an agreement. Sit down, Mr. Bennett, Judge Vance said, her voice sharp. Ms. Williams, you have the floor. Thank you, Your Honor, Ava said. She walked to the clerk and handed over a stack of documents. I am submitting into evidence our formal response to the petition, along with a motion for an emergency hearing on asset valuation and a motion for sanctions. A murmur went through Simone's side of the room. Sanctions? The petitioner has declared the value of the property at 24 South Battery to be $480,000, Ava continued, turning to face the judge. We contend that this is a fraudulent valuation. That figure is based on a residential appraisal that is over 3 years old. She placed a document on the projector. Exhibit A, the petitioner's submitted appraisal, dated June 2019. Now, she said, switching the slide, Exhibit B, the official record from the City of Charleston Planning Commission, dated April 2021. It confirms that the property at 24 South Battery was rezoned from single-family residential to mixed-use commercial. The judge leaned forward, peering at the document on the screen. This rezoning, Ava's voice was like steel, was the result of an 18-month effort spearheaded, managed, and executed by my client, Mr. Marcus Hayes, utilizing his professional expertise and his state-issued commercial appraiser's license. Simone's face, which had been a mask of cool confidence, began to crumble. She shot a panicked look at her lawyer, who was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly agape. Julian's smug expression had vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. And what, Ms. Williams? The judge asked, her interest clearly piqued. Is the result of this rezoning on the property's value? Ava saved the best for last. Your Honor, I now submit Exhibit C, a new certified commercial appraisal of the property, completed last week. She put the summary page on the projector. The number was there in large, black, undeniable font. $300,000. A collective gasp seemed to be sucked out of the air on Simone's side. Her face went bone white. The color drained from her cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. She looked at Marcus, her eyes wide with a mixture of fury and utter disbelief. This was not the broken, pathetic man she had kicked out of her house. This was a stranger, a cold, calculating opponent who had just publicly checkmated her. Her lawyer, Bennett, was on his feet, stammering. Your Honor, this is preposterous, an outrage. The property is a family inheritance. Ava Williams cut him off with surgical precision. An inheritance, Your Honor, whose value was increased by $820,000 through the direct professional labor of my client during the marriage. Under South Carolina law, that appreciation is a marital asset, fully subject to equitable distribution. The petitioner and her counsel have not only attempted to hide this asset from my client, but they have also attempted to defraud this court by knowingly submitting a false financial declaration. The room was silent. The weight of Ava's words settled over them. Judge Vance took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at the documents, then at the white-faced trio of Simone, Julian, and their flustered lawyer. Her expression was grim. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet, "you have put your client in a very precarious position. I am freezing this asset immediately. I am also ordering a new, court-appointed independent commercial appraisal of the property at 24 South Battery. This hearing is adjourned until that appraisal is complete." She banged her gavel. "And Ms. Williams, I will be taking your motion for sanctions under advisement. I suggest you get your house in order, Mr. Bennett." It was over. As people began to file out, Simone remained frozen in her chair, staring at Marcus. Her beautiful, composed face was a twisted mask of rage. He met her gaze across the courtroom, held it for 3 long seconds, and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a gesture of triumph. It was a simple, final acknowledgement. "You underestimated me." Then he turned and walked away, the sound of his steady footsteps echoing in the sudden, cavernous silence of their ruined life. The consequences of that hearing cascaded through Simone's world with the force of a tidal wave, washing away the foundations of her privilege and arrogance. The quiet, surgical strike in the courtroom was just the beginning. The real damage was tallied in dollars, reputations, and relationships in the weeks that followed. The first consequence was financial, and it was immediate. Her good old boy lawyer, Franklin Bennett, was a specialist in amicable rubber-stamped divorces between Charleston's elite. He was utterly out of his depth in a contentious, high-stakes financial dispute involving accusations of fraud. After a blistering phone call from Simone's furious father, Bennett was fired. Simone was forced to hire a new legal team, a shark-infested firm from Colombia that specialized in forensic accounting and scorched earth litigation. Their non-refundable retainer was a staggering $50,000. Their partners billed at $2,200 per hour. The simple, cheap divorce she had planned was now a financial black hole, sucking money from the very trust fund she had lorded over Marcus for years. The second consequence came 3 weeks later in the form of a certified letter. The court-appointed independent appraiser, a neutral third party with an impeccable reputation, had completed his assessment. His valuation came in even higher than Marcus's. The official, legally binding fair market value of 24 South Battery was not $480,000, not $1.3 million, but $135 million. The attempted fraud was no longer an accusation, it was a court-verified fact. Judge Vance was, to put it mildly, displeased. Simone's credibility in the eyes of the court was utterly destroyed. Her new, expensive lawyers advised her that going to trial would be an act of financial suicide. The judge would likely award Marcus an even larger share of the assets as a punitive measure. This led to the third, most devastating consequence: the settlement. Faced with no other choice, Simone was forced to the negotiating table. The math was brutal and undeniable. The home's initial value of $480,000 was her separate property. The increase in value, or appreciation, was $870,000, $135 Mariners minus $480K. Ava Williams, arguing from a position of absolute strength, refused to accept anything less than a 50-50 split of the marital appreciation. After a single tense 4-hour mediation session, Simone capitulated. Marcus was awarded $435,000 tax-free, but Simone didn't have $435,000 in liquid cash. Her wealth was tied up in trusts, stocks, and of course, the house. To pay Marcus his court-ordered share, she had only one option. She had to sell the house. The family legacy, the symbol of her family's status on the Battery, the very thing she had tried to cheat him out of, had to be put on the market. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. The fourth consequence was the implosion of her family. Her father, Richard, was apoplectic. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the public humiliation and the loss of the iconic property. He saw Simone not as a victim, but as an incompetent fool who had been outmaneuvered by the man he had always considered a simpleton. Their relationship became strained and cold. Julian, the architect of the sign it fast strategy, bore the brunt of the blame. He was the one who had assured everyone that Marcus was a pushover. He was now an outcast, his advice worthless, his presence at family gatherings a source of bitter resentment. The family that had popped champagne together to celebrate their victory was now tearing itself apart in a flurry of blame and recrimination. Finally, there was the social fallout. In the tight-knit, gossip-fueled world of Charleston's upper crust, the forced sale of 24 South Battery was a major event. The story, in all its delicious detail, leaked out. How the quiet, working-class husband, the appraiser, had used his own expertise to turn the tables on his wealthy, arrogant wife. How she had tried to cheat him and ended up losing her ancestral home. Simone became a cautionary tale whispered about at cocktail parties and charity galas. She was no longer the enviable heiress. She was the woman who had been publicly and comprehensively humbled. She had lost her house, a significant portion of her net worth, and the one thing she valued above all else, her unassailable social standing. Marcus had taken more than money. He had taken her pride. 2 years later, the Charleston sun streamed through the large arched window of a beautifully restored office on Queen Street. The space was open and airy, with exposed brick walls, modern furniture, and the subtle scent of fresh coffee. On the frosted glass door, elegant black letters spelled out Hayes Valuation Services. This was Marcus's new world. He had taken the $435,000 from the settlement and invested it in himself. He had poured his energy not into someone else's legacy, but into building his own. His firm, specializing in complex commercial and mixed-use property appraisals, had become the gold standard in the city. His reputation for meticulous, unassailable work, ironically cemented by the very case that had ended his marriage, preceded him. He was no longer a $72,000 a year employee. His independent practice had cleared over $250,000 in its first full year of operation. He sat at his large custom-made desk, built from reclaimed local cypress wood, reviewing a file. He wore a crisp, tailored shirt and the same simple $89 Timex watch. Some things didn't need to change. The glass towers of the financial district were visible from his window, but he preferred the view of the small, vibrant garden in the courtyard below, a space he'd helped design and plant with other tenants in the building. It was a place of authentic growth, a world away from the cold, curated perfection of Simone's manicured estate. The quiet hum of the office was interrupted by a light knock. A woman with warm, intelligent eyes and a cascade of beautiful braids peeked in. It was Chloe, an architect whose office was just down the hall. "Burning the midnight oil, Mr. Hayes?" she asked, a playful smile on her face. "Just finishing up the assessment on the old Maritime building," he said, smiling back. "You heading out?" "I am. But I was thinking, how about we grab some of that quaint fried shrimp on Shem Creek on our way home?" she asked, her use of the word quaint a gentle, loving jab at a story he had once told her. Their relationship was as solid and well-constructed as the buildings she designed. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, shared laughter, and an appreciation for each other's work. She didn't care about the name on his deed. She cared about the character of the man himself. As he packed up his briefcase, Marcus glanced out the window at the Charleston skyline, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He thought of Simone. He had heard she'd moved to a modern condo downtown after the sale of the house. He felt no bitterness, no lingering anger, only a quiet sense of resolution. He realized the great moral of his story. True wealth was never about the dollar value of an inherited house or the balance of a trust fund. That was just paper. True value, the kind that couldn't be cheated or taken away, was the worth you built within yourself. It was your skill, your integrity, your character. Simone and her family had looked at him and seen only his modest salary and his humble background. They never bothered to appraise the man himself. By trying to devalue him, they had only exposed the hollowness of their own values. They had lost a mansion, but they had been bankrupt long before that. Sometimes the greatest asset you can possess is a clear and honest understanding of your own worth, especially when no one else seems to see it. It's a valuation that no one can dispute and no market can diminish. What do you believe is the source of a person's true worth? Share your thoughts with our community in the comments. We're grateful to have you here at Love Beyond Pride, where every story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit.